Could everybody start moving to their seats, please? Could everybody please start moving towards your seats so we could get this late meeting started a little sooner than later? Okay, good morning. The July 12th Board of Directors meeting is called to order. First, I'd like to take a moment to ask our interpreters to explain how to access interpretation. Please go ahead.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom with a mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis and then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está usted utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en su celular o tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, por favor de pedir los auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region has historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay Digueño, the Luceño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. This land is nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tessa, can you please confirm a quorum?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I am confirming a quorum with 4 member agencies absent.
Very good. We'll start today with non-agenda public and member comments. As a reminder, no comment shall use loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting. None of that will be tolerated. Any such language or any other disorderly conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the Board of Directors meeting is prohibited. Per our board policy, the amount of time allocated for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 1 minute for their comments. Tessa, please go ahead with non-agenda public comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair. A reminder to the public, we take the first 5 non-agenda public commenters at the beginning of the meeting. Those commenters will be Truth, Ellen C., Mike, Catherine Rhodes, and Mark. The remaining public commenters will be called at the end of the meeting. That includes Mary Davis, Rita Clement, Paul Henkin, and Consuelo. Truth?
All right, I want to see board rules followed today, which includes all points of order. For a variety of reasons, past 60 seconds, I want to give a great job shout out to Jay Dunn, Miss Maxon, Terry, definitely Tony, and especially Jack Fisher. For the shame shout out, the first one goes to Jacktivists for suggesting that people's homes and lives don't matter just because they're potentially wealthier than those who live near highways. That's a definition of inequity. All lives matter. The second shame shout out goes to Alicia for suggesting that America can afford to pay another 0.1% in cost for people who are not lawful citizens. First, America is economically suffering. We're actually becoming like Mexico in many ways. We've got people without homes and we got people who can't afford to move. It's like all the unfinished homes in Mexico where people ran out of money. Second, we have a saying here in America, stay in your lane. Mexico doesn't get to decide what's good or acceptable for us, we do. And I think some of you North County reps fear a trolley solution because you know what it brings with it, homelessness and crime. But you're okay with everyone south of you suffering while you stay isolated in Katie's colonial fortresses or coastal citadels.
Your time expired. LNC, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mike.
Concerning the XO meeting, one of the items brought up was legislative report. Lausanne corridor, why don't we tell the senators what we did last week, and actually fantastic discussion. Thank you, Mayor Krantz, because I-5 corridor is sensible, done quicker, less money, get the reports out. And you guys all voted on it to actually, but yet there's no vote to say yes. Let's push the I-5 corridor. 50 homes will not have to be suffering. And as far as Encinitas, I haven't been down there. I understand the beautiful train station. That'll be lost, but you know what? That could be a beautiful community center. There you go. I-5 corridor. Make it happen, folks, because right now I'm seeing this SB 10698. Blake Spear, she used to be a chair here, by the way, and you could communicate, hey, stop wasting money on the Lausanne corridor, and especially not the second tier along marshland. As is pointed out over here last time, is we could start the marshland into beautiful back since 1800s, pristine beauty, no railroad track, getting ready to go.
And your time expired.
Thank you.
Next commenter, Mike, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Catherine Rhodes. Catherine Rhodes. Mike. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I'll be real quick here. Tribal Summit meeting, public displays of affection. Yeah, Vivian, we saw the kiss. It's disgusting. Like, can we like kind of keep it down? It's a little quorum. It's I don't know. It's a bad look. We've already got a lot of problems with innuendo from past people that sat at this table. And yeah, I don't know if you remember it or not. I'm pretty sure you do. But yeah, can public displays of affection amongst anybody that sits at this table. It's kind of a conflict of interest, it looks like, especially when the public sees it. I'm pretty sure other people here in the room that were there saw it. So yeah, bad luck.
Catherine Rhodes, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mark.
Hello, and I have my thing here that I wanted to show. So if you could put me there and put it back to a minute, please, so I could share my screen. I could come back and let somebody else do it, and then I could share my screen.
You should have the prompt to accept the promotion.
No, I don't see it. Here it is. Well, we'll see if it is. Okay, and then I'll put my thing on and see if it comes on the screen. Can you,
Can you make your comments without that on the screen, Catherine?
I actually have this specifically because I want to show the picture that I have. So I would like it on the screen like I did yesterday too.
Catherine, we're going to go ahead and call Mark up
Okay,
to
great.
speak, and the staff will help you. Mark, please come ahead.
Mark, so this is a free YouTube video. Its title is Klaus Schwab 2017 Young Global Leaders Audio Cleaned Up. Klaus is spelled Klaus SCHWAB. In this video, in under 2 minutes, you can literally see him stating that he's penetrated governments, including over half of Canada's cabinet and France, and now your local board here. I am not for executing anyone or them being harmed or hurt, but these are serious crimes that need to be addressed. And these people shouldn't be in our government. That's obvious. This is literally abetting an enemy that's a foreign power and taking away our sovereignty as citizens. And you can really notice that also. Rosa Corey talks in her video. You see Rosa Corey part 1 on YouTube. The real title's longer, behind the green mask or something. You can see her stating that there's no chance for decline. You guys, don't even get funded if you don't do this. And Gavin Newsom, by the way, is a young global leader. It's not all right.
Your time expired. Is Catherine? Okay, we'll go ahead to our first virtual commenter. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that she is our number 5. So is she? I don't see her in the queue as. Oh, she's already promoted.
Let's go, Catherine.
I'm just going to go and, let's see, let me get my presentation up at least.
Catherine, I know the picture will be effective, but let's just go ahead with your comments, and maybe you can we'll give you half a minute extra to describe the picture.
You got it. Thank you so much. So anyway, I've got 3 pictures. The first one, this is all about your SANDAG's proposed headquarters, a multi-use facility and bus stopover on the full block bounded by A, B, Union, and State Street. So what I would like you guys to do when you go by the courthouse, it's right, right across from the courthouse, is go to this building that's being built right now. What they have is they have a 20-foot fault buffer setback for their building. It's supposed to be 50 by law, but everybody in the city of San Diego, county of San Diego, just puts in 25 on their own. Has nothing to do with the law or the science or anything like that. So this is your project right here. This is the fault that they have going right through your project. When you first bought the project, when you first bought the land, first it was going to be affordable housing. And then I called the people and said, why did you guys drop out of this project? And they said they found something. They are doing their due diligence. And then I came here and said, you guys have to actually do your due diligence. And instead of doing that, you spent, I forgot how many, 44 million, I forgot how many millions of dollars on it. But anyway, here's the Alquist Priolo map. And here is the active fault going right through your property. And nobody cares. I brought this up to your audit committee, and they said that they don't have enough information to say that I'm right. They just blew it off. And so what you're doing is you're building specifically on an active fault. That is illegal. That is fraud. That is waste. That is abuse. And not one single person here in the whole entire board for 19 years, not
Your
one
time
person
has
ever helped.
expired. And Catherine, if you could email your slide or photograph to me at clerk@sandag.org, I'll be happy to send that to the board of directors.
Thank you, Tessa. Thank you to the speakers. And now we're on to non-agenda comments by members. Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much, Chair. I wanted to bring up, and I brought this up at the executive committee. I think we should have a policy of having a pledge of allegiance at all of and a tribal acknowledgement at all of our subcommittees. I was recently, it was on June 21st, we had a joint borders, regional planning and transportation. I brought it up that we skipped the pledge and also the tribal acknowledgement. And then the chair at the time, Jack Shue, said, well, I don't have that in the notes. we're not, basically, we're not doing it. I was rebuffed. So a little bit later, we ended up having the Pledge of Allegiance. I actually went back and I pulled up the video. Originally, it was just in Spanish, and then thank you very much, Mario Urso, for providing it in English. I did go to it and look at the English just actually the other day, and it's muted. There is no audio for that time. I find that a little offensive as a patriot of the United States, and this is not a partisan issue, but I do take offense to that it is muted. No audio, and just that part of the video, everything else is fine. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I think we need to be very clear on what our direction is and that we don't have things like this happening. It doesn't look good for us. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up. Want to have the policy, want to make sure we're adhering to it and making sure that all board chairs understand what we're about, that we open our meetings with a Pledge of Allegiance and a tribal acknowledgement, because that's what we do here at the Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burkholder.
Thank you. I too have been muted on one of the videos here, so I do find that interesting. Thank you, Mayor Jones, for bringing that to our attention. Carlsbad has been paying into the Transnet since, I guess, 1987 when it passed. I'm just wondering if staff could provide me with any data points that I can take back to the residents to show what the Transnet dollars have been used for in Carlsbad, please.
Thank you. Director Townsend.
Good morning. Thank you. I just wanted to inform the board that Caltrans will be performing some work on the I-15 express lanes over the next 4 to 5 weeks. It's very important that we address some of the issues on the express lanes maintenance wise. So you could be seeing some work on there, but we're working along with various staff members to ensure we diminish any impacts to the traveling public. So wanted to share that.
Thank you. That concludes non-agenda member comments. I'd like to welcome a few faces we don't see here that often. Some alternates are here. Tracy Martinez, council member from Del Mar, is here. We have Alonzo Gonzalez for Chula Vista is here, and George Gastel from Lemon Grove is here. Thank you all for being here and filling these seats. Your voices are important. I don't have any other updates on behalf of board leadership. Mario, what do you have?
Thank you. Under my updates, the general agency updates, we have been reviewing the agency organization. What I call flattening a little bit the leadership team. And this, what this means is that several directors are starting to report directly to me. And this is to have a greater oversight as well as having that learning curve. I'm picking up on items on the agency as I'm transitioning in. We're really focusing on ways how to improve the project monitoring and controls of the agency and how we deliver projects. We look forward to bringing in a full assessment of the agency. I will be bringing in a full assessment of the agency, the status, as well as the organizational functions or reorganizational functions sometime in September or October timeframe. For some of the board of directors requests, we've updated the bus stopover project that will be agendized in September. That we're working with the chairwoman on this. We sent a budget and scope information for the inland rail trails late yesterday, so I hope you all got that. We can follow up with any follow-up questions on that item. On the office move, we're meeting with the different suppliers, and they're going to be beginning the tenant improvements on the new space that was leased. On State Route 125, I think it's important that we have been adding some project management oversight. We have a new project manager overseeing the back office starting this week. And this is part of the assessment that we're also going to be doing and reporting back in the fall. I do have some serious questions about the transition to the new back office, and that will be part of my report once I get more information about that. We're working through the coordination with other agencies, and basically we're going and seeing best practices with other tolling agencies and see what we can learn from them and how we can implement the system. I was also made aware that HNTV had given a credit to the agency for $50,000 for services that they were either done or not done, but there was a credit. And since then, the team has activated to react that or to bring them on board to use that credit. And that will be to close out the cap system. So they're using that and utilizing the credit, basically not paying them, but using the credit that was given to us. Regarding Lausanne, the scoping period ends this Friday. We have received more than 900 comments across the different platforms, mail, email, webpage, ongoing. Today we're going to have a team meeting, and that team meeting is to the next steps on the value analysis. What's the plan, as well as what is our next strategy on moving forward with the project on the different engagement. And this is following the commitment and the guidance that the board gave us. Otay Mesa East, you will be getting an update from the team today. Regarding the regional plan, there's going to be a joint meeting with the Mobility and Sustainable Community Working Groups scheduled for Thursday, August the 8th. I think this is important because, again, trying to get the working groups, the policy advisory committees more engaged and having more discussions at those forums. So that's why we're taking the RTP and having a working meeting with those groups, as well as after that, we should be bringing in September to the board of directors the outcome of those meetings and the update of the regional transportation plan and where we are with all that modeling and the greenhouse emissions and where are we with the targets. Regarding the state budget, as you all know, the state budget got signed, and there are a couple of highlights that I want to bring up. It preserves important transit and active transportation funding, including for Lausanne and our transit agencies. It did cut $75 million from the Caltrans Highways to Boulevards pilot program, leaving the program with a total of $75 million. SANDAG was one of the 3 agencies in the state that was recipient to that pilot program. So we are going to be working with the state, with Caltrans, and see how that affects those pilot programs. Finally, after a significant advocacy effort from SANDAG alongside with the statewide partners, the budget restores $260 million for the Regional Early Action Program, or REAP 2.0, resulting in a cut of $40 million. The program was 300, so it went down to 260, but the proposal was to cut the full amount of 300 million. We really appreciate the leadership of the board members and the work of our advocates in Sacramento for helping protect this important funds in this challenging fiscal environment. This allows SANDAG to move forward with the Housing Accelerator Program, and we will be meeting with the different awardees and the local agencies to see what are the next steps on that item. On the bike program, staff is preparing for the Pershing Bikeway grand opening on Saturday, July 27 at 10 a.m. at Bird Park. We really hope that you all can join us at that. Also bringing in an important project program update to the Transportation Committee next week. We have a lot of work to do on the bike program. There's good progress that's happening, but we also see a lot of opportunities to improve. And similar to what I mentioned with project management, we are working in those improvement plans. Regarding the audits, later today, we will hear from our independent auditor on her office fiscal year 25 audit plan. We really look forward to working with OIPA, with Courtney, and really looking into our accountability and improving our efficiency. We will hear about some of our financial audits on the board next meeting. We are really digging into the findings and the recommendations. We'll be making organizational changes to make sure that we resource appropriately to support the work and the recommendations that OIPA is providing us. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mario. Mayor Jones, you have a question for Mario?
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you so much, Chair. I had a quick question on the housing acceleration funds. You had mentioned that all of the funds were not cut. Does that mean that any of our funds were cut here locally? Because I know that we have some planning, we, the city of San Marcos, have some planning dollars in there.
I think
Wondering if we,
our planning director is gonna provide
Right.
more information of that.
Good news, Mayor, we're going to be able to keep your grants whole.
awesome, thank
Yep.
you. Thanks.
That's good news. Okay, that brings us to the consent calendar. Right now, Tessa, do we have any public comments on consent?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have 4 in-person, or I apologize, 3 in-person public commenters and 2 virtual. Truth, please come to the podium.
The minutes say that Nora was finally started a meeting on time, so it's time to celebrate that rare occasion. I say we have a SANDAG Pizza Friday for the next meeting. And for the record, I had timed Mario's update and it was about 15 minutes long with a Q&A. Today's was 7 minutes, so next time, SANDAG 60 seconds for you. For the minutes about Transportation Development Act money, what's not included in the update about the SB 125 money coming in. That's big news. NTS is going to have another 138 million to spend on everywhere. Buddy's County, same as SANDAG. On page 6, Melanie's name is misspelled, and on page 7, Rebecca's name is missing. Unacceptable. I appreciate that Samsung is also noted as being Consuelo. I also appreciate when Tessa says the phrase, Samsung, can you hear me? And for the record, I stuck around to hear the continued non-agenda comments that are noted. And the minutes say the first drop off from the meeting was Katie, then Roll, then Bill in 10-minute increments. Did you guys plan that? And item 3 on June 27th, the Jewel had to break the news that Fact doesn't get all the gold coins anymore. But I did see Arun did get his briefcase back, and that's the kind of stuff that really matters. And I'm curious if Chief of Staff Victoria, is she ever going to get a promotion? Thank you.
Alan C., please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mark.
Guys, broke my heart. She couldn't show her PowerPoint slide. In certain meetings, why don't we go at least 2 minutes? Come on. I mean, last week when we saw the senior citizens, last meeting, senior citizens spoke, they got cut off after 1 lousy minute. A lousy 2 minutes. Can't we do that for the public? You guys get paid a stipend to be here till 5 o'clock. Yet a lot of people book out about noon and don't even hear the closing comments of the remaining public speakers. Ask this board, John Kirk, in the faith of, for the public transparency and all that, the audit claim, why don't we have at least minimal 2 minutes, people? Some of the stuff brought up, Mayor Krause, you took up what I suggested, which I suggested a year ago, by the way. But it's so important to hear from the public. If you only give them a minute, the PowerPoint slide. That we used to be able to upload that in advance. Francisca's doing a phenomenal job, but if she is allowed to get the PowerPoints ahead of time so she can screen it and have it ready to rock and roll, because that's part of her speech got denied. Please, 2 minutes for the public. I yield back.
Your time expired. Mark, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by first virtual Paul Henkin.
As per the Brown Act, 1 minute is not a reasonable amount of time. If you don't think so, try to limit yourself to 1 minute on any of these agenda items to see how you feel. I already stated that the Klaus Schwab video where he's saying he penetrated governments. In regards to meetings and events attended, 3 here, a lot of your agendas are UN agendas that are being done by, in California, Newsom is a young global leader, and you actually can't get dollars unless you do the bidding that he's doing for the United Nations, Agenda 21. This is not sovereignty. It's not freedom. We have no possibility of dissent. It's completely not all right. And I don't know what part of him literally saying to you in the video in less than 2 minutes that he's penetrated governments and he's proud of Trudeau and half his cabinet being penetrated in Canada and also France with Macron and now members on our very board here. So it needs to be addressed.
Your time has expired. Our first virtual public commenter, Paul Henkin, will be followed by the final 2, Stowe and Blair Beekman. Paul, go ahead.
Controller's hand was raised too. Approval of the minutes. I guess it is what it is. But I'm disappointed that there is no indication of welcome to the new CEO. And I was hoping that after the new CEO hinted at more details in the minutes, that there would be. But I'm disappointed that I just see a list of speaker names and not a hint of what was discussed in the consent agenda. I'm glad to see details of what the board discussed in the discussion items. I also wonder why you identified Speaker Samsung by name and not the others who preferred not to use their real names. And by the way, I think that you ought to shelve the Lausanne in the coastal areas since the whole thing is unstable.
And your time expired. Our next commenter will be Stowe, and I see that Consuelo has just raised her hand, so we'll take her as the final speaker after Blair Beekman. Stowe, go ahead. You are self-muted. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next commenter, Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. The consent calendar item was called for public speakers really quickly, and I was putting away my laundry, and it took me time to raise my hand. So thank you for noticing my hand and offering to allow myself and Consuelo to both speak. Thank you. To also note, I had my hand raised for non-agenda public comment. I wasn't called for end of the meeting public comment. I hope I can be to note that at this time. With that all said, good luck on the consent calendar on meeting minutes approval. You talked about Lausanne issues that you also just talked about in the previous executive committee meeting. There needs to be a reporting done by 2026 that SANDAG wants the reporting to be clear. Good luck how it can be an accountable process and to try to include the concepts of LA County Rail and East County Freight and High-Speed Rail in San Diego County and possibly the desert. We have to be more open and clear in that.
And your time expired. I will try again for the commenter STO, Stowe. If you could please go ahead. You are self-muted. Okay, we will go on to the next last commenter, Consuelo. Please go ahead. You are self-muted. There you go.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. And I just wanted to say that, yeah, we're here and we're virtual and we're doing a lot of other things besides trying to, listen in on these meetings. So it's a little confusing sometimes. Anyways, with that being said, really quick, I wanted to say, it's really sad how, the Pledge of Allegiance was muted. And Rebecca, you don't know where this is heading, seriously. Allow me to remind you, government, the clever and deceptive art of using euphemisms, lies, emotionalism, and fear-mongering to dupe the average people into accepting and even demanding the chains of their own enslavement. And call me Consuelo or Samsung, but go ahead and refer to me as a tax-paying concerned citizen who makes time to get involved and listen in on.
Your time expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. On to member comments. I see, Councilmember Fisher, you don't want to, no, we're good. All righty. So if no further discussion, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So.
Okay, that was by motion by Shu, second by Keim. Please vote. George? Looks like we're good.
That
Very good.
motion passes with those members present.
Okay, so we're moving on to item number 4, which is the fiscal year 2025 annual audit plan. Courtney, Ruby is here. Please go ahead. And after you present, we will take public comments. And Chair Zito.
Welcome, everybody. Dave Zito, Chair of the Audit Committee. I wanted to introduce this item and Courtney and the great work that the team has done in order to provide for a couple of comments in additional context, which is this year, the audit plan is in a little bit different format, which Courtney will go over, but I think it's more usable and more readable and help us to understand. But also, and leading up to this audit plan, as we're well aware, this board has had a lot of discussion around the investigation results around the 125 toll road issues. And while the board itself didn't provide any direct guidance on what to look into necessarily, what the audit committee did was to actually internalize some of the feedback from the board and from the public. And you'll see that incorporated into this audit plan with a few specific items. Notably, one of the ongoing audits listed is the HNTB audit, in which just what is the oversight being done there and how that contract was done is there. And one of the upcoming audits, there's a sole source audit. One of the items in the sole source audit will be the A to B contract along with the Deloitte contract as well. And then not called out specifically, but in listed items under investigations, there is currently an ongoing investigation, which is, for lack of a better term, known as the who knew what, why, when, where investigation. So those 3 things were incorporated in the audit plan. You should see them in there as an outcome from that, as guided by the audit committee and directed. With that, I'll turn it over to Courtney.
Thank you, Chair Zito. And thank you, board. It's an honor to be in front of you today and to present my first annual audit plan. The plan is in accordance with California Assembly Bill 805 and SANDAG Board Policy 39. And Board Policy 39, Section 6.4 states, the independent performance auditor shall annually prepare an audit plan based upon the results of the risk assessment and conducts audits in accordance therewith. This process includes identifying, evaluating, and prioritizing key risks to develop an effective and impactful audit plan. The report that I'll go through today has the steps involved in the risk assessment process and concludes with the proposed audit plan of fiscal year 25. I want to thank the Board of Directors and Audit Committee members who participated and SANDAG's executive team and department directors for entrusting me with your concerns and sharing your ideas during this year's annual risk assessment process. The effectiveness of this process is dependent upon open and honest communication with key stakeholders, in addition to OIPA's analysis of the risks surrounding SANDAG. That was it. The message I just shared from, I'm going to walk through, whoops, is that me? Okay. The next page is the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor, and this just goes through the authority of the office, the responsibility, and then the standards. And we are bound by government auditing standards with all our audit work. And I would recommend no higher standard than that. So that is, you are in good hands with us following government auditing standards. And we are peer reviewed every 3 years to ensure that we are in compliance with those government auditing standards and that you then can rely upon our work. What OIPA produces is we produce annual reports, investigations, and corrective action plans and special requests. So the annual reports is the corrective action plan when we go in and we do follow-up work on our audit recommendations and we tell you what has been implemented, partially implemented or fully implemented and closed. We'll be presenting that to the audit committee in September. For this year's, for the outstanding recommendations, that's approximately 60. And then after it goes to audit committee, it will come before you all. We also do an annual investigations report, which we anticipate coming in front of you next in September as well. And we presented that to the audit committee yesterday. So in addition to the bulk of our work, which is performance audits, the investigations we conduct are both investigations that come through the whistleblower hotline, in addition to investigations that are initiated either by myself and the board, the audit committee, or requests by management. We do have to evaluate special requests based on the allocation, the resources that we have available to do those special requests. The next page goes over the strategic goals for fiscal year 25, and we have 4 goals. The first, policy process improvement and system controls, really focuses on conducting performance audits focused on high-risk areas where improvements will create a needed organizational change and address systemic issues impacting operations. We have limited resources. We want to bring the greatest impact to the organization. So that's very much why we go through this annual risk assessment process. And that really is embodied in the first goal. The second is the detection of fraud, waste, and abuse. We want to ensure that we're performing timely investigations in the area of fraud, waste, abuse, and gross mismanagement. And we have, for example, SR 125, we initiated that and completed it in 3 months. Now, that was an expedited investigation timeline for many reasons, but the purpose of just calling that out is just to state that our commitment is to bring our reports to you in a timely manner. The enhancement of the whistleblower hotline. In coming on board, this was very important to me to both educate the employees as well as the governing body and management in relation to the effectiveness of operating a whistleblower hotline. We really operate best when people can come and bring us tips, and they can do that anonymously and confidentially. And then one of the things that we're going to do this year is develop a contractor outreach program. And I'll work with contracts and procurement on ways that we can get out there in the public forum with the contractors, because again, we're looking for those tips. The last is the development and monitoring of the corrective action plan, which I already talked about a little, but we want to make sure that we are making recommendations that are clear, timely, and responsive, and that they're implemented by management expeditiously. The next page of the report is of the performance measures. I'm not going to go through all these, but I will tell you that these performance measures are designed to make sure that the IPA, myself, if effectiveness in meeting the legislative mandates can be evaluated. That includes producing quality, impactful work, maintaining and developing a professional audit team, and conducting work independently while maintaining professional and respectful working relationships with auditees, management, and the governing body. Now we get to the bulk of this, what precedes the development of the annual, or what is the process to develop the annual work plan. We perform a risk assessment, and that risk assessment is involved a process to detect, evaluate, and prioritize prospective audits based on the level of risk presented to the organization. How we do this is many of you participated in risk interviews with me. So I take those interviews incredibly seriously. I was also honored to meet with the directors and management, executive management, and hear their thoughts. It really gives me a fuller picture of the organization and the concerns. And just as I talked about when in the whistleblower program, how people have information, they know what's working and not working. That's how we get tips. When we come to the risk assessment process and we're talking about organizational effectiveness, you all know what concerns you. You know what keeps you up at night, or what you just would like to see better, that's done better. So that's a big part of this process, is taking in that information. In addition, I'm reviewing documents and reports, some reports from years ago in relation to some of the things that have happened at SANDAG. All that information is being taken in as we're determining what our audit plan will be. We also look at what's coming through the hotline and previous hotline reports. We consider internal and external risk. And this is all documented in these 3 pages in the report. And internal and external risk includes staffing, whether we have enough staff, whether we have the appropriate staff, whether there are process improvements that need to be made, meaning policies and procedures that are there or not there or could be improved. Technology challenges. Do we have the right technology? Are we evaluating our technology to make sure that we're safe? fiscal impact, SANDAG's project delivery model. And then this is all filtered through the urgency as well as our available resources. And then we certainly don't want to duplicate any kind of effort because we all have enough work to do without OIPA doing the same work that other assessors are out there doing. So now if we turn to the fiscal year 2025 audit plan, this includes projects already in process and those that will begin in fiscal year 25 based on the above framework that I've just discussed with you. So audits currently in process and anticipated to be completed this year. As Chair Zito has already mentioned, HNTB. This audit is designed to evaluate if there was sufficient oversight over the contractor and provided by the contractor, and if SANDAG complies with established contracting requirements and models best practices. We have our annual body of work, which I've already mentioned, which means the annual recommendation follow-up report, which is that corrective action plan. It's been called the CAP. And in addition to the annual investigations report and the annual risk assessment and audit work plan that I'm presenting today. So as the process accumulates the potential areas we could go into, now we come down to the decisions of the highest risk areas. This is a list that I will go through. I want to talk a little bit about the audit process. So we go through a planning process that we pick the high risk topics, and then we will go through a process to determine the audit objectives. For these areas, those audit objectives have not been determined. What an audit objective does is it is intended to accomplish, and it can be thought of as questions about the program that my team will seek to answer based on evidence that we've obtained and assessed against criteria. So we have these topics, we start to do our planning work. That's where we really zone in on where is the highest risk area in the program that we can evaluate to bring you the greatest organizational impact. When we look at this list, and then scope, just for those of you know, scope can be a time period that we're looking at in addition to contracts. We may be looking at specific contracts. So scope is what we're looking at. So the first one on the priority audits and reports to launch in fiscal year 25 is the independent assessment of the financial department. We know that this came forth from the SR 125 investigation. This will be contracted. We are getting ready to issue the RFP for that. And then I will provide the oversight over the contractor and will be involved in reporting that out to you all. Number two, as Chair Zito already mentioned, there was great discussion about the sole source procurement process and the board's desire, as well as the audit committee moving it forward to approve it already on the plan. With the sole source procurement process, this too is in the contracting realm. And if you all recall, I committed that we would have focused resources in contracting in OIPA going forward. So this is a contracting audit, as is the HNTB. This will include evaluating the A to B and Deloitte award in addition to SANDAG's sole source procurement processes and looking at other awards. Next, we go to the ethical climate survey. So in my risk assessment interviews, in your discussions here at the board, in the discussions at the audit committee, culture continues to be discussed. There's great concerns about that. What the ethical culture survey does is it creates a baseline. So the ethical climate survey that we will use will be from the Institute of Local Government. It will measure the degree of which ethical standards influence organizational and individual decision-making and helps identify ethical blind spots. The first section of the survey gauges opinions about ethics of individual employees. The second and third sections respectively gauge opinions about the ethics of management and elected officials. This will be our baseline report. So we'll be able to state where the organization is, and then in a year and a half or 2 years, we'll do another assessment so we can gauge how the organization is doing. Next is a performance audit of the administration of the bike program.
So what we know is that in 2013, the Board of Directors approved $200 million in an initial investment over 10 years to implement the Regional Bike Plan Early Action Program. This is a network of high-quality bikeways comprised of 77 linear miles of new facilities designed to increase transportation options. 10 years would have completed in approximately 2023. In June of this year, June 12, 2024, a staff report to ITAC anticipates completion of this program in fiscal year 29. And as of fiscal year 2023, total bike program funding was $400 million, almost $400 million, which is double. So my team and I will engage in the process that I stated before. We'll be looking towards what questions we want to answer that will bring forth the greatest information about the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of this program. Next, we move into talent management, and that's workforce planning and succession management. We know there is not one government agency that is not focused on succession planning, as we have the silver tsunami and we have the impacts of COVID on the workforce. So this is where my team and I will dig in to looking at what addresses the current and future human resource needs to help prepare SANDAG to address expected and unexpected gaps in its workforce at varying levels. We will look at whether effective workforce and succession planning processes have been put in place to enable SANDAG to be responsive to the dynamic work environments and government priorities. Next, we will be looking at a departmental risk assessment process. So in the spring, we will meet with the executive team and the directors. We will educate them, walk through a process of going through internal controls. Not that they don't know about internal controls, but we'll go through a detailed education process. And then every director will work with us on preparing questionnaires, internal control questionnaires, and risk assessment questionnaires. This will give us a good sense of throughout the agency where the risks are. We'll use this certainly to inform next year's risk assessment process, but we'll also be producing a report so that you all understand as well what risks that we're looking at. The next performance audit is the project management. This is internal projects as well as capital projects. So when I say internal projects, that can be the ERP, that could be the move. It really is going to look at how does SANDAG manage its internal projects. External capital projects, we will be selecting a few capital projects to look at that. A performance audit scope is typically designed to focus on the achievement of goals, opportunity for improvement, and accountability for results in this process. And with our emphasis on the whistleblower hotline program and investigations that we initiate outside of that program, we anticipate issuing 4 investigations during this year. So there are many more audit topics than we have the capacity to look at. So I would just direct you all, when you have an opportunity, to look at Appendix C. And these are the potential audit topics that were considered. And if we can just slide to the last page in the report. Thank you. Right there. So when we look at this, this will give you an idea of what we considered. It will also means that these items they may move up next year into the plan, but it gives us an ability to start to document, memorialize what are the concerns that have been raised. And with that, I will just direct you to the appendix when you have some spare time and you want to learn more about OIPA. Appendix A will tell you about our structure, responsibilities, compliance with generally accepted government auditing standards. It'll talk about our whistleblower hotline program and it has our budget. And Appendix B has fiscal year 24 accomplishments. With that, I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Courtney. Before we go to member comments, we'll go to the public. Tessa?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Our first public commenter on item 4, Truth, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Catherine Rhodes.
Yesterday, the People's Audit found that Courtney needs to have better communication of procedural timelines with the public. But SANDAG's culture of corruption is mostly out of Courtney's circle of control. $14 million has gone to WSP, while over $48 million has gone to politically connected sales tax pushers HNTB with 887 contracts. Canada-based WSP promotes a climate cult, ESG, and are involved in building dangerous fire hazards known as battery storage sites or gigafactories. WSP is also working on a tunnel in Australia. Will they get the contract to tunnel Del Mar and Solana Beach? $9.5 million to JPM. Is that JP Morgan or 6-month-old JPM Transit in LA? 3.1% of the invoices tested did match how much the companies actually got paid. Some had no documents. Courtney only sampled a few. How many more records are missing, and is anyone going to find them? Expecting companies to provide SANDAG with the missing invoices is unacceptable. Mara's excuse was that SANDAG has weak tools. That weak response was the best he could offer for an agency that wasted billions of the people's tax dollars for decades. There needs to be people in prison for fraud, embezzlement, waste, abuse, and many other charges.
Your time expired. I do have 7 remaining public commenters on this item. Catherine Rhodes, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Alan C. and then Mark.
Hello, this is Catherine. And one thing about the audit plan, they're now saying that there's only like a 1-year limit. If you don't get put in your complaint within 1 year, it's done. Nobody's ever going to look at it. And that just came up out of the blue. Yesterday, they mentioned it. They didn't mention it today. And so what I would like to do is to actually have those types of issues come before the audit committee, and you guys actually have a discussion on it before it's all of a sudden the law. It never came before you. You guys never talked about it. So I have a big, huge problem with that. And then, of course, I'm going to have to re-put in my whistleblower complaint because you guys blew it off. You basically said that I'm a liar, that you guys are doing things properly, you guys are doing things legal, and there's no corruption as it relates to the port, the airport, SANDAG, now SANDAG, because you guys, ignored my my issue. So now I'm talking about you, and I'm going to say you guys are corrupt. You guys have waste, abuse.
And your time has expired. Our next commenter, Ellen C., please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mark and then Mike.
Can't put these on the table. May I put these on the table?
Put them here.
They can't see this.
Well, just hold them up because you can't set my name on.
Okay, anyways. Again, the PowerPoint. It hurts when I can't show slides and I can't even show. Okay, thank you for doing that. One thing you neglected where you went right past the arrow of the audit. In this audit, it actually said, let me state, identified 7 items of I-25 charge, ETN, fast lane financial reporting cannot be relied upon. And yet you're proposing 805 and fruit you down the road 5. Please, look at this, and we've been overcharged already. $400 million for bike lanes. Couldn't you take $100 million of that, pay the stupid thing off, and don't make it a managed lane on 125? Because a year ago, you all voted to stop the toll on 125, and yet a month later, they put new toll readers in, which caused 45,000 drivers to get mischarged. This is the future of your freeways, right there. Caltrans, take away the 2 concrete barriers. You're talking about redoing the expressway? Take them 2 concrete barriers out. You can add 2 lanes and stop all this.
Your time has expired. Mark, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mike, then our first virtual, Paul Hinken.
Mark, talk about gross mismanagement. First of all, if you look at the big picture of where it goes, if you don't stop inflation, which gets exponentially worse, we're 34 trillion in debt, the whole country, and we only make 22 trillion, and you have programs and address it the way you are, what's going to happen is more and more people will not be able to afford to live and will be homeless. And you've got people making a profit off of, including Blackstone, which should be totally illegal, organizations like that, investment organizations. And they're buying our land. You're subsidizing the 2/3 of the rents for these low-cost, low-income people. That's unsustainable. Eventually, where that leads, it's easy to see that you'll use our tax dollars to buy more of our private property away from us and make us pay 2/3 of the rent, as more of us are unable to afford housing because of inflation.
Your time has expired. Mike, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Paul Henkin and the final two commenters, Consuelo and Blair Beekman.
Hey, Courtney, good afternoon, morning, wherever we're at. I don't know. I just want some clarification. When it says ethical climate survey, and with the whole whistleblower thing, there's still a serious problem coming from the city of Vista with regards to their vice mayor currently, and with their old vice mayor, and with the coup that they ran, their old or their current mayor off the SANDAG seat roughly about a year and a half ago, I want to say. That's still not being addressed, I feel, right? Karina still has a huge influence in everything that she does. When I say she, I refer to Katie. Their levers, their interests, their relationship that they're involved in. It's a pretty bad situation, and it still exists. And we're still here.
And your time has expired. Our first virtual commenter, Paul Henkin, please go ahead.
It's good that the status of corrective action plans in response to the OIPA's audit findings and recommendations will be verified and reported to the audit committee. But there have been complaints from both the public and board members that we were not fully briefed on audit-related events, such as the I-125 tolling scandal. So the briefings should be fully public for full transparency. In fact, it would enhance risk assessment to have a full public airing of auditing risks as well. On page 15, there are 3 audits which looked into matters with severely critical findings from 2019 to present. Findings and recommendations were made on all of them, and then you say that they just align with those previously issued, which sounds like.
And your time expired. Consuelo, please go ahead.
So the fact that there has to be a whistleblower hotline is so lame, such a waste of time and resources. And I'm going to recycle what I said yesterday. This whistleblower hotline, government investigating government. What could possibly go wrong? Economically wasteful. That just sums up SANDAG, doesn't it? This is all to save face for a sinking ship. I didn't say that yesterday, but I got that idea from Truthy. So will there be litigation or for illegal misuse of assets activity? Probably not. The history of OIPA, they wanted a successful outreach to inform the people OIPA exists. The majority of the people don't even know SANDAG exists. In conclusion, this is so shady and unnecessary. Let's be real, nothing and no one will be held accountable. It will be swept under the government rug, dirty, bureaucratic business as usual.
Our final commenter, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Just as a quick note, I hope we can make open the conversation of a light footprint on the future of rail tracks through the Del Mar area. With that said, I'm actually very thankful that you've worked on these whistleblower items. The work I do with tech accountability, when it was first introduced in 2014, part of its process was to have really good whistleblower protections as well. When you work well within government, when you're developing trust within your departments, that emanates over time, and that creates something for the community that's really helpful. I mean, think if we do those same things with police actions and whistleblower protections, we build a better community. So good luck, and good luck with accountability practices. I'm really thankful the CEO has done such a really good job in showing up at meetings and committee meetings as well. Good luck in how we talk about accountability practices for meeting agendas and with the public, and invite the public to add to accountability practices. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Now we're on to member comments and discussion. First up is Councilmember Molina.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Courtney and Mr. Zito for this presentation. I actually do really appreciate one of the goals that you described at the very beginning. I believe it was goal number 3, enhancement of the whistleblower hotline program. I think the entire report is really, really good. It gives me a lot of confidence as far as the direction that SANDAG is going in. I do hope that a lot of these endeavors do give some people, reasons to trust what we're doing here. I know some people will never be swayed, but I do feel that bringing trust and transparency and openness to SANDAG is a necessity that perhaps in the past was not the focus, and today, to me, it feels like it is, and I am very happy to see that. My question has to do with that number 3, enhancement of the whistleblower hotline program. Courtney, you briefly mentioned that that is going to include plus a contractor something or something, and I didn't quite catch what it was. Can you please repeat and perhaps elaborate a little bit?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Molinas. It is in relation to the exposure when we look at risk and the fact that we have so much money in capital projects when we look at our budget. So it's really getting our face out there, having avenues where contractors can call in, subcontractors, if there's things out there that are amiss. It's taking the internal whistleblower program, not that we don't take, anybody can access the whistleblower program today, right? But it's meant to go out and do the outreach, to have the awareness so that people can then, if there are any concerns of improprieties, then that those are reported into us.
Thank you. So it is enhancing the whistleblower program specifically to contractors and
Correct.
people related.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Molina.
Thank you, Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is specifically about on the action plan, page 20. And so it specifies that we actually have 2 vacant positions today, one being a principal independent auditor and then also a senior independent auditor. How long have those 2 been vacant?
We have just initiated the recruitment a couple weeks ago, so we are very hopeful. So in relation to vacancy, this was something that was discussed in the audit committee mid spring, I would say. So we've acted on working with HR to get those put forward.
So that will bring us up to the 9, correct?
Correct.
And then on the 13, it says that that we're expected by 27 to be 13 full-time employees. How many or equivalents? How many, what are the specifications of how many are going to be support staff or auditors? Like, I just am curious why you didn't put that in here. And I actually would like to see it in the future to say, okay, by this time, we're expecting this so that we can provide these many audits and that sort of thing, because I think it helps us understand the process a little bit better.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. We will include it. It is all performance auditor positions.
And would those be principal auditors or senior independent auditors or associate auditors? I think maybe, and you might not know off the top of your head right this moment. You might have to look back at something else. But I think having that in our, in our paperwork actually helps us understand a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I can provide that out to the board.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just adding a little bit of clarity, Courtney did come up with a staffing proposal that she did bring to the audit committee, which outlines all of that. And it was brought to us earlier this year. And it exists out there. And the 2 positions that are currently vacant weren't actually approved, funded through the budget until July 1st of this year. So, they couldn't even been staffed before then. There are current proposals, as you see, for expanding of it, which Courtney has outlined her proposed org chart, which she'll make available to it. But they aren't in the budget yet, and they still will have to be discussed whether or not the board feels that they're an appropriate expansion of the team as we move forward.
Got it. Thank you, because that's actually important information, because I wasn't sure, were they actually staff prior, or are those new positions? So thanks for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Duncan.
Thank you. Good morning. First, I would like to say that I appreciate us having this on the agenda near the beginning of our meetings. In the past, we've had other reports from our former auditor at the very end of a 4 or 5 hour meeting. So I really do appreciate this. I echo Director Molina's comments that I have every confidence in what you're doing, Ms. Ruby, and I appreciate all of your effort and candor and hard work. I have a couple questions for you. I just want to make sure, and maybe after your comments, maybe the general counsel or the CEO could help as well if they have anything to add. But I just want to make sure these comments existed, or my questions existed prior to any other comments today, and they're not related to any comments that were just made earlier by the public. They're very different. I think that, I'm in my second term here on SANDAG, and I don't really know the answer to these questions. When we're looking at audits, I think that I should know the answers to these questions. Maybe others do, or maybe it's in something that I missed. But I am curious, as a lawyer who practices in federal court, we have rules of professional responsibility that require us to disclose certain things, obviously, right? So we can't have a relationship with the judge we're in front of and things like that. So is there any rules or procedures or disclosures at SANDAG if, for instance, like someone who signs off on a contractor's invoices has a 3-year relationship? This is all hypothetical. I'm not making an accusation, but I do want to know the answer. Is there any required disclosure of like that type of relationship? Are there any procedures or written disclosures required if employees have relationships with our contractors?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Duncan. How it works according to state law, and if general counsel wants to add to it, is that in relation to personnel matters, they are kept out of the public in relation to if we found an employee to be interacting with a contractor inappropriately.
So that's more the consequence if we happen to find out, but that's definitely not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, what's the procedure for disclosure internally in SANDAG, employee to SANDAG entity? I'm not asking you to tell me if we've found somebody out and they've been terminated for it or something. What I'm saying is, what is the procedure of SANDAG to ensure that there's clean or no appearance of impropriety, whether it's illegal or ethical or just a conflict or an appearance of conflict of interest between the staff at SANDAG and I'm not, again, no allegations, I'll say, whoever, pick any person who works here. And how do we know? Do we ask? Do they have to sign a disclosure? Hey, I am the, whatever. We'll say, take this because he's not here. I'm not accusing him. Let's say the CFO was dating the, CEO of our biggest contractor. Would we know that? Do we ask? Is there any disclosures required? Because to me, that would be a major issue.
I am gonna.
I think Mr. Kirk has something to add.
General counsel.
I thought he might. Thank you, sir.
Reply.
We deal with that specifically in our employee handbook. And our employee handbook prohibits conflicts of interest, and it defines what those conflicts of interest are. And the conflicts of interest that are prohibited for someone who has involvement or oversight of a contract includes both financial conflicts that perhaps are more objectively defined as ownership or maybe a source of income, but it also addresses relationships and close relationships. So both of those are defined in the employee handbook. In terms of carrying that out, that's something that an employee attests to when they become involved with a contract through the procurement process. They have to sign a formal disclosure indicating if they have any such relationships, and through the more objective ones, a Form 700 would flag those as well. And that's what we do our best to monitor those.
So I appreciate that. Obviously, I'd like to see that language. And maybe if we cannot know, any details, that's fine. But I'm curious, in the history of SANDAG, or in the last 5 years or whatever it is, has that occurred? Do we know, and have there been any violations that were subsequently discovered after these attestations? I assume it's an annual attestation, you're saying, or is it just onboarding?
The Form 700 is annual.
Well, that's for every employee of SANDAG, does it form?
For everyone who has anything to do with the procurement process, who will weigh in on how public funds are spent. And that's what our conflict of interest code does, is it defines every position that could have an impact on how public resources are spent. After the budget is approved, you then approve that conflict of interest code, recognizing all of those positions. Then all of those employees have to annually file a Form 700. Other than that, on a transactional basis, with every procurement, at the front end of that procurement, the contracts department has anyone who is being a part of measuring the proposals that come in, judging those or ranking them. They have to sign a form indicating that they have no improper relationships there. And I will say that maybe an area where it has come up in the past, to respond to your question, that goes beyond what I discussed, is that we also make sure that employees do not have any relationship with any firm with whom they may be negotiating employment in the future. This is something that we let employees know in both in the annual conflicts training that we do to them, as well as employees are leaving. And we have, I think in the past, we've had one instance where it was discovered after the fact that an employee had been involved to some extent with a procurement. They subsequently went with that firm, hadn't flagged that, and we pulled that contract back from that firm in an abundance of caution. That's some years back, but that's another area where that can come back that we do our best to monitor.
So I appreciate that. And my request would be, and if it's appropriate, if not, we can do it at the board level or something at some point if we get it through the executive committee, is potentially to have the auditor just take a look at whether or not there's any potential improvements in that policy. Because when I see, things very narrowly defined, for instance, on all of our projects, does all of the management have to do that disclosure? Or is it just the person, and proactive is often better than reactive to me, in the sense that, we have the heavy hitter decision makers at the agency. There's, I don't know how many you want to say, 5, 10, 20, whatever it is. It's not that big. We know the list of who all of our vendors are. So it doesn't seem that hard to say, because I'm obviously very familiar with Form 700. I file them all the time, but in my elected position, but that's something I think it might be worth, and maybe give the public some more comfort as well. Because again, Form 700 doesn't deal with personal relationships, just financial relationships. And I think it's a big difference. So, obviously I would disclose if, I'm on council and we're approving a, $50 million project at Coronado, and, my wife works for the, vendor, one of the 3 vendors we're hiring. That's not in Form 700. So I don't know. I think that's something maybe we could look to see if there's any improvement. And if there's no issues, then great. There's no issues. But if there are, then I think the public and we as directors should know that in our responsibility and fiduciary duties. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Mayor White.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Because of the recent challenges with HNTB, is it possible to pause that relationship until the audit is complete and it's concluded that SANDAG has complied with the established contracting requirements? Whoever wants to take that one.
See, it's always possible to pause a procurement. I believe that the process in that has already, the normal process for flagging prohibited conflicts of interest applies to that as it does to any other contract. But certainly at the board's direction, you can direct us to pause any kind of a procurement. I leave it to staff to recognize what are the implications of that pause? What are the operational impacts? Will there be other cost implications of doing that? But that's certainly within your discretion.
I think I personally would like to at least explore that possibility.
Mayor, can you clear, is it all relationships with HNTB or a specific one?
I think it depends on what our general counsel just said, but especially anything moving forward.
Okay. Well, let us do some research work and get back to you and see if we can get to a point that we provide you the information, and then it could be a better a more understanding or of the risk and what's ongoing and everything. And then that can keep going, that conversation. Would that be acceptable?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you just said in your report, Mario, too, that we have a $50,000 kind of credit with them that we're working through. And there's.
That was the 125. It was mentioned, I don't know when, but it was mentioned that they had given us a credit. So the team needed to have them come back and close out the CAPS program. And they're utilizing that $50,000 credit, basically having them do the work, but not paying them with money, right? Using that credit that was given to the agency. That's what was explained to me yesterday.
Okay, all right. All right, Mayor Kranz, you're up.
Thank you. I appreciate the report. I have a question about Appendix C. And, as I review that list, I know obviously that a lot of those items are operational items that I think is under the purview of the new CEO. And so one of the things that I'm interested in knowing more about, recognizing that you have only a certain capacity, whether there's some way to identify those items that are on this Appendix C list that maybe staff in some way or another could address if necessary. And I'm not sure what that would look like, whether that's through the audit committee. It says here that these aren't prioritized and they're in no particular order, but maybe there's a way that there could be an order created to and identify whether we want to figure out a way to accelerate a review of those items. And so I just look at this list and think, heck, that's a lot of stuff that really goes to the credibility of the agency that if we're kind of putting it on the back burner because OIPA doesn't have the capacity, then maybe we need to look more closely at how we create either more capacity with your office or figure out another way for the CEO to have the ability to address some of these issues. So it's I think an indication of just how seriously you take your job and the audit committee. And clearly from where I sit, it seems really obvious that one of the most important things we need to do is to reestablish credibility. And so that's why the role that your office is playing is so important. But seeing a list like that as being, potential audit topics that were considered, but beyond the capacity is concerning. So I don't know if the CEO wants to.
Let's turn it over to Mario, who I know is taking a look at a lot of this.
Well, first of all, I've been working with Courtney very closely, but I think that we are looking into the agency, assessing some of the procedures, assessing some of the endeavors. And like I mentioned, project management is one of them, which will be hit on even on OIPA's reports that will be next on the next board meeting. So we are trying to tackle these ones as we're going. So I think we're in parallel routes. We really appreciate flagging the items that we need to improve and really go on it. We really appreciate the organizational structure when they're evaluating those items. But at the same time, I'm also finding some areas that need to be focused on, and some of them are somewhat within this list. So I think we're all doing our part to the amount and capacity that we can. I think that's what Courtney mentioned. I won't speak for her, but she mentioned she identified the ones that saw more opportunity in providing more information and better benefits for the agency. But we don't take the rest of the list lightly. There are other items that I'm looking that may not even be on the list. So if we would go and just try to get everything at once, I don't think we will have the capacity to do that.
I assume that the phrase drinking from a fire hose probably applies to where you're at right now. It's probably coming at you pretty strong. So I recognize that it'll take a little time to kind of sort through this stuff, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Courtney?
Before I go to Councilmember Shu, Councilmember Molina, oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment that when we look at these potential audit topics, we would have to evaluate when we talk about improvement or effectiveness or non-effectiveness. We always come into a audit looking at whether it is effective or ineffective, right? So we don't know. Just because it's on a list doesn't mean that we've determined there to be a problem. And then I think it's looking at how it's been dealt with in the past for topics that show up that we can't address in my former roles. Is there may be something on this list where you all feel you want an independent assessment of that. You don't want it to wait. And usually that will result in a contracting. It's very much like the financial assessment of the finance department that we're moving forward on from the SR 125. And then it's placed in my portfolio, right? I have oversight over it. So it's fully an independent assessment. So just to make the distinction for the board and for the public that there is work on here that management is doing, but then the independent evaluation or assessment goes through a different level of rigor and brings that information to you.
Councilmember Molina, you had a comment on this topic.
Thank you very much, Mayor Huebner, for allowing me to follow up on Mayor Kranz's comment briefly. I'm glad that we are discussing this Appendix C, and thank you, Courtney, for the clarification you just stated that these items are in fact, perhaps not yet at the level where an independent audit is working towards it, but it is on management's purview. And I did want to piggyback on Mayor Kranz's address to Mr. Orso. Here, there's two items here listed, or two times it's listed staff travel. I'm glad that you mentioned that it's not on here twice, perhaps because it is such a concern. Personally, I'm not necessarily concerned about that, but I do want to point to the purchasing card practices line. And that one is one that I would like to highlight for Mr. Orso. Again, I don't necessarily think that it is necessary for the auditor or for your office to be handling that precisely at this moment, given the amount of work that you've just described to us that you will be doing in 2025. But having that item on this list, I think, is very important, and that is one that I am interested in. And so if through Mr. Orso, if that is one that continues to be part of what management is looking at and taking care that it is done correctly. I know my first year on SANDAG last year, there were topics related to that that were discussed here and there. And I just want to make sure, Mr. Orso, you understand that is something that I continue to be interested in, and the practices being confirmed as being legit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. I'm going to start by following up on something that Councilman Duncan brought up, which is the Form 700s and other conflict of interest hard lines that the agency has. Just for something I want to throw out there, and I think Mario, you may be familiar with this since you're a former state manager and employee. State has another level of kind of guidance for employees called incompatible activities. So that's not so much a hard line, but incompatible activities is maybe something SANDAG can consider for requiring at least employees to read and understand what that softer line is in terms of not making the agency look poor. And I think that may be something we could add to your long list of things to recommend to SANDAG to help move along. Conflict of interest, Form 700, those are things that we're familiar with. They're hard lines. And I think, SANDAG's been compliant with that. That's fine. But the incompatible activities line, I know has helped when I was in state service for a long time, helped me understand a different line to work with. And it's less of a legal line. It is just appearance of improprieties. I think government has to be reliable enough, and I think government is generally reliable enough to look at other governments. So having government oversee government with an independent auditor is real critical, and I trust that process. And I appreciate your work, Courtney, in doing that, working very quickly when you first got on board to work on the 125 issues. So thank you for that. And your work plan looks very ambitious. But I think if I would take a step back, and I've talked to our new CEO about this, we're talking about a cultural change within SANDAG. It has been going on for several years, and I hope that cultural change continues. Cultural change, institutional change takes a long time, and I hope all of us as board members understand that, sole source contracts that were done in the past is a process that SANDAG was very accustomed to doing. But I was not accustomed to doing it so often when I was in public service. It was rare that we had sole source, but it seems like a standard process that SANDAG uses often. So I'm glad we're looking at things like that in this cultural institutional change process that we're embarking on. With someone who's completely independent of SANDAG in terms of giving suggestions on how to make that change. So thank you for being in that process. And like my other board members here, I'm really happy with the direction we're moving in. And it's going to take some time, but I think we're moving certainly in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Duncan?
Thank you. I just have an extremely brief comment. So, Mr. Wade, are the two gentlemen sitting right behind you there, are they on the audit committee? No? Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. I see nobody else up on the board, so let's see if anybody wants to make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2025 annual audit plan that we just heard.
I second.
Okay, that was Kranz and Molina. Okay. Please vote.
And that motion passes with those jurisdictions present.
Okay, let's move on to item number 5, the State Route 11 and Otay Mesa East Port of Entry Agreements. Betsy Blake, you're going to kick it off, I understand?
Good afternoon, board members and chair. How are we doing on time? Our presentation is about 15 minutes. Is that good, or do we need to accelerate that?
No, I think we need to hear the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
No, the whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. My name is Maria Rodriguez Molina. I'm the project lead for the Otay Mesa East 11 Port of Entry project. With me, I have Senior Legal Counsel Betsy Blake. And behind me, I have two gentlemen here with the Otay Mesa East team. We have Peter Schellenberger, our financial advisor with PFM, and Victor Shu, our legal advisor from the international law firm Norton Rose Fulbright. And also I would like to point out Nikki Tianco, the project lead at Caltrans, is also here. So they'll be ready to answer any specific questions you have. Today, we're going to ask the board to adopt the resolution that was recommended by the Borders Committee on June 28th that allows the execution of 3 binational agreements. Betsy will cover these agreements in detail during the presentation. Before that, I would like to give you some updates of what has happened since we last were here on May 10th. So on June 27th, SANDAG and Caltrans signed an MOU with Customs and Border Protection and General Service Administration that allow us to move to 100% design. This MOU also allows us to bring on board a contractor for pre-construction services for the Port of Entry and the State Highway Facility. On June 28th, the board approved the release of the construction manager general contractor procurement. A few days later, on July 9th, we advertised this contract. This procurement process is going to take about 8 to 9 months, and we hope to have a contractor on board to do pre-construction services with us, finalizing the design by March 2025. There have been a lot of talks lately about the schedule of the project, and I want to clarify some of those dates. Important to note that the dates I'm going to give you are contingent on Customs and Border Protection and General Service Administration giving SANDAG approval to proceed to construction next year. If we get that approval, we will begin construction sometime late summer 2025 or fall 2025. Construction takes about 2 years, but we are going to work with CBP and GSA on an approach of doing a phased opening. That means we would prioritize maybe opening for cargo first, and maybe later for passenger vehicles or vice versa. We're going to evaluate these options with a contractor next year. So there could be an opening earlier than 2027. The overall cost of the project, you're aware, is $1.3 billion. We have spent about $600 million to complete the environmental process, environmental mitigation, the construction of all the roadways and connectors to SR 125 and SR 905, build the 2 miles of SR 11. And right now we are moving forward towards the 100% design on the port of entry and the California Highway Patrol Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Facility. Mexico is going to be completing their project by September this year, and that includes the roadway that you see there on Boulevard de las Torres and their port of entry. I don't want to take a lot of time, so I'll briefly mention the benefit of the project. OME will be an innovative, safe, and secure border crossing with a goal of 20 to 30 minutes average wait time. It will reduce emissions at the border caused by idling vehicles. It will allow for a more efficient border crossing experience while also reducing border wait times at the other 2 ports of entry. It will also promote trade and economic growth. And lastly, I would like to highlight the benefit cost ratio is 5-1. And now I'm going to pass it on to Betsy to go through the agreements.
Great, thanks, Maria. So before I discuss the binational agreements that are before the board today for approval, I just want to remind the board of 2 key agreements that have brought us to this point. The first was a non-binding memorandum of understanding that SANDAG signed back in 2021 with Caltrans and several Mexican agencies. And it outlined the unique collaborative tolling structure that supports Otay Mesa East. Now, under a traditional approach, Mexico would collect its own toll for northbound traffic, and SANDAG would collect its own toll for southbound traffic. What the 2021 MOU did was provide for something different, whereby SANDAG would act as the sole toll authority for the project and collect tolls for both northbound and southbound traffic, which would be allocated between SANDAG and Caltrans. Now, this arrangement allows the parties to better manage congestion through a variable toll, which is something that SANDAG has authority to impose. So then the second agreement that brought us to this point was the binding 2022 toll revenues agreement between SANDAG and Mexico's Department of Infrastructure, Communication, and Transportation. And we refer to that as SICT. It's essentially their Federal Department of Transportation. Now, that agreement created binding commitments behind the parties' 2021 MOU. And I just want to remind the board of some key provisions in that agreement that are relevant for today's item. Now, the first item in the 2022 agreement, it provided that the toll revenues would be allocated equitably between the parties. And in the early years, that would be 60-40, 60% to SANDAG and 40% to SICT. We often refer to this as the modified 50-50 split, and it's in place for the early years of the agreement. Mexico agreed to the modified 50-50 to support SANDAG so that we could go get the investment grade ratings that we need to sell the non-recourse toll revenue bonds that we're going to use to help finance the project. One of the other items in that 2022 agreement is that it created or aimed to create the binational working group, which would be made up of SICT representatives and SANDAG representatives to do two key things. One, they'll advise the board of directors on how tolls should be set. And then second, they'll also approve the tolling operation and maintenance expenses budget, which this board would ratify. Now that budget pays certain eligible expenses from the project's toll revenues before the revenues are split between SICT and SANDAG. We refer to this as the off-the-top split. The 2022 agreement also provided that the North American Development Bank, which I know many of you are familiar with, NAB Bank, that they would hold the toll revenues for the parties and actually affect the split. So that happened a couple years ago, and it brings us to today. The agreements that are before the board for approval are in fuchsia. We have an amendment to that 2022 agreement, the toll allocation agreement amendment. We also have the two agreements that were referenced in that 2022 agreement, the toll governance agreement and the custodial agreement with NAB Bank, which I'll discuss now. So let's talk first about the amendment to the 2022 toll revenue sharing agreement, or the toll allocation agreement, as we now refer to it. So there are two significant amendments within the toll allocation agreement amendment that I want to discuss. The first relates to interest on that extra 10% that SICT is allowing SANDAG to use every month. We're going to discuss the specifics in a second, but essentially SICT is asking for interest on that extra 10% to be paid monthly as SANDAG receives it, as opposed to at the end of the year. Under the current agreement, we would only pay interest at the end of the year on any shortfall that we fail to repay SICT. Now, our financial advisors indicate that the proposed change will have no material impact on the project's finances. The second relates to the movement of the toll readers to the Mexico side of the border. Now, several changes were required to support that approach, including moving to a cashless system, which we'll discuss. There are also some other less significant changes, things like changing the title from toll revenue sharing to toll allocation agreement to be in better accord with certain Federal Highways Administration regulations. Also, we're doing something like making the binational working group a Brown Act body so that it can have that direct line of advice to the board of directors. So I want to first dive deeper into Mexico's request to receive interest monthly on that extra 10%. The changes to the 2022 agreement are there in light green. Now, under the proposed amendment, we will pay SICT investment earnings on that 10% that we hold during the year. Also, if SANDAG were to use a portion of that 10% to do something like make our bond payments or fund up reserve accounts, we would owe SICT interest at a defined short-term rate. Now, the box in dark green shows a term that stays the same, and that is if SANDAG were to fail to repay Mexico the 10% in full at the end of the year, we would owe them interest on any shortfall amount. So let me show you what these changes look like. Let's start first with reminding the board about what the original modified 50-50 split looked like under the 2022 agreement. That legend in the top right explains the party who holds the funds during the various stages. You see the daily toll revenues come in from SANDAG to the North American Development Bank Toll Revenues Fund. And SANDAG is able to requisition amounts from that fund to pay allowed tolling O&M expenses, that off-the-top expense. Now, near the end of the month, NAB Bank will transfer amounts from the Toll Revenues Fund to the Net Toll Revenues Fund, where it affects the split between the parties. And here in the early years, we see 60% going to SANDAG's bond trustee so that we can make our debt payments and fund up reserve accounts. Then at the end of the year, SANDAG's trustee would pay Mexico back that extra 10%. And of course, if there's a failure to pay back any portion of that, there would be interest on that amount. So that's what the past flow of funds looked like. Let me show you the new flow of funds. So you'll see the big change here is that there's a new box in royal blue on that far right-hand corner called the coverage fund. And that fund, which is held by SANDAG's bond trustee, is essentially a parking lot for the 10% that Mexico is allowing SANDAG to use during the year. So investment earnings from that fund will go to SICT monthly. And as I mentioned, if SANDAG uses any portion of that fund to make debt service payments, fund up reserves, we would owe Mexico interest on that amount. And as I stated, our financial advisors have indicated this would not have any material impact on the project's finances. So that's the request that Mexico's made for interest on the 10%. Let's talk next about the changes related to the relocation of the toll readers. Now, before I get into the details of the proposed changes, I want to remind the board about this proposal to relocate the toll readers, which we briefed you on, I think it was May 10th. And as we discussed then, Federal Highways Administration raised concerns over whether our original structure, where there's a single toll collection point on State Route 11, where vehicles could pay cash, FHWA raised questions about whether or not that conformed with certain federal regulations that govern how tolls on federally funded highways like State Route 11 can be used. So specifically, FHWA was concerned that those regulations could prevent us from sharing the toll revenue with Mexico and possibly could prevent us from using the toll revenues to pay certain non-surface transportation elements, like, for example, customs and border protections, operation and maintenance expenses. So under Mario's leadership, we worked with FHWA to craft a solution so that it conformed with the regulations. And together, we developed this new structure that moves the actual financial transaction outside of the State Route 11 footprint. So under this new structure, which is before you here, the primary toll readers will be located on the Mexico side of the border with redundant readers in both Mexico and the US. So you'll see the primary readers are listed as number 1, which will ping the vehicles for both northbound and southbound traffic. We have another redundant reader in Mexico in case the primary Mexican readers go down. And of course, we have redundant system on the US side as well. And the redundant readers would be used if the Mexican primary readers go down. And so in that case, we would rely on those US readers. We would also be moving to a completely cashless system so that the actual financial transaction happens outside of the State Route 11 footprint in SANDAG's tolling back office. Now, I want to note here that the team has not yet determined what that back office system will be. We're doing our due diligence to determine the best system to use for the project's needs. And as I mentioned in May, we did sign an agreement with FHWA that confirms this new tolling structure. So the proposed amendment before the board today reflects this. The other item that is addressed within the amendment relates to the situation where if we do collect toll revenues on those US side readers, we refer to those as restricted toll revenues. So the agreement ensures that we use those restricted toll revenues in accordance with FHWA regulations and also ensures that Mexico receives its fair share. Happy to go into detail on how the agreement is set up to do that, but that's the other big change to the agreement. So the next binational agreement is a custodial agreement with the North American Development Bank, which was contemplated by that 2022 toll revenues agreement. Now, NAB Bank, as many of you know, it's a binational organization. It's made up of officials from both the United States and Mexico, and their goal is to support infrastructure projects that benefit the environment and people of both the United States and Mexico. And they were chosen because they're seen as highly trustworthy to hold these funds. Now, This agreement it's a technical agreement. Some of the basic terms are before you. Essentially, it just outlines how NABBank is to hold and distribute the toll revenues. I do want to note NABBank is requesting a $25,000 initial setup fee to act as custodian, and they would also are requesting a $25,000 annual fee, which would be adjusted in accordance with the consumer price index annually, to be paid after toll operations commence. So, and also just wanted to show the board a visual that shows how toll revenues would flow through NABBank. Happy to go into detail on this slide. Essentially, NABBank will maintain the funds and accounts that are identified in purple, and those funds and accounts would be invested while they're held by NABBank in accordance with both NABBank's investment policy and SANDAG's. So that is the custodial agreement. Let's talk next about the toll governance agreement, which was also contemplated by that 2022 toll revenues agreement. So the toll governance agreement creates and structures that binational working group that I mentioned. We refer to this as the BWG and defines the binational working group's responsibilities. Now, the binational working group will be made up of 3 SANDAG representatives, 3 SICT representatives. One of the 3 SANDAG representatives will be from Caltrans and would be appointed by Caltrans District 11's director. The BWG will have a chair and vice chair who jointly will set the meeting's agendas and have the ability to call additional meetings. The meetings, as I mentioned, are going to be done in accordance with the Brown Act here in San Diego County. SICT representatives will be traveling here, and they will be reimbursed for their travel expenses in accordance with SANDAG's travel policy to be paid from that off-the-top tolling O&M budget. Also wanted to talk about the binational working group's responsibilities. They'll be responsible to approve the tolling O&M budget for the year. They'll be responsible to advise SANDAG on how tolls should be set and also make recommendations to SANDAG related to tolling operations and the project. And finally, this is a summary of how the annual tolling O&M budget process would flow. On September 15th, SANDAG would provide its proposed tolling O&M budget to the binational working group. By January 15th, the BWG would submit the approved tolling O&M budget to this board for ratification, somewhat similar to ARGIS. SANDAG's board does have the power to amend that budget if there are unforeseen circumstances or to avoid default under the bond indenture or potential TIFIA loan. So that's a summary of the proposed agreements. And as Maria noted, the Borders Committee has recommended that the board adopt the proposed resolution authorizing the execution of these agreements. And we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, team, very, very much. This represents a lot of progress. Thank you to our new CEO for your smart leadership and getting this to the point that it is. We're going to go to public comments before we go to our member comments. Tessa?
Thank you. I do have 7 public commenters on this item. The first, Truth, please come to the podium.
How is it possible that nobody at SANDAG knew it was illegal for an MPO to use a federal entry to collect a toll? Is this a technique for SANDAG to avoid federal compliance and skirt the law? Mario said that Texas and Arizona applied for the presidential permit to operate a border crossing. They both failed. So SANDAG thinks it's not going to fail too. Davis Farr found over 37 million couldn't be accounted for from the 125 toll fiasco. Next time you're going to have an international incident when SANDAG inevitably fails to pay Mexico's unearned 50% share. Or if Mexico lies and increases the numbers on their toll readers and SANDAG fails to check. But as Vivian said,
potential revenue that this agency is going to have a hold of is going to be immense, just crazy.
7.2 billion at stake. Is that more important than withholding the toll from Mexico until they fix their sewage and biotoxin pollution, destroying our environment and hurting our people? This historically negligent agreement disregards the health of everyone living near the southern border and a slap in the face of every low-income person who doesn't have money for a toll or for a lawsuit against Mexico for the decades-long damages. Voting
Your
yes
time
seals
has
that inevitable
expired.
justice.
I did have one additional hand raised on this item virtually, so I have 7 more commenters. Mary Davis, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Alan C.
Hi, I'm just wondering, is the representative from Mexico here today? No, okay. So first of all, no, a big no to moving the toll collection to Mexico. This is a bait and switch from what you sold the public on to get this project approved. It also calls into question competence or what your true intent might have been to not be aware of illegal constraints that were upon you regarding how the toll revenue could be used. And now you're offering us this unacceptable workaround as a solution. Two, Mexico prioritized building a new port of entry instead of completing their adequate wastewater treatment infrastructure system. As such, you must absolutely integrate accountability measures on Mexico by withholding their portion of the toll revenue until such time they resolve the hazmat sewage poisoning of our South Bay communities. By creating sanctions, it would compel them to perform and abide by Title VI environmental justice. Thank you.
Our next commenter, Ellen C., please come to the podium to be followed by Mark and then Catherine Rhodes.
If I may, can you put up slide 20 before I speak? Start the time. They didn't print it out yet. If that's okay, can you put up slide 20 from their presentation, if that's okay? Sorry, if you want to get the next speaker while you're sort of queuing that.
It just takes us a minute because we can't do the timer while we put a slide on the screen.
Thank you.
I'll be setting the timer on the phone.
Thank you so much, Tess. Yeah, it's slide 20. It has a little 20 in the bottom corner. There we go. Yeah, thank you so much.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, we just had the audit talk about 7 hits on 125 toll. The previous audit for Mary, multiple hits on the toll, and yet we're doing a binational toll policy and putting readers down there. But now you look at this list of who the board members, the investors, the bank collectors, we got our own government collecting the money, making bank off it. Is this what we really want? I want to take this deeper. I talked to some of these feds when we had a Chula Vista City Council meeting and said, hey, every day our beaches are shut down from border sewage, i.e. Punta Bears an hour south to Mexico dumping raw sewage. Why don't we make that part of the agreement? Because our number one tourism is our beaches. Yeah, we got one beach, IB, has been shut down for over a year. Let's make that part of the agreement. Hey, Mexico, you close our beaches down, we're going to stop all commerce. And by the way, why don't we make that part of the toll collection to pay for what we're suffering on our side? It's not an attack against another country, but it's a factor.
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Mark, please come to the podium, followed by Catherine Rhodes.
Mark, there's so many things wrong with this. It's unbelievable. First of all, it's a 40-year agreement. That's a really long time. Secondly, it says SANDAG cannot deliver its multitude of regional programs and initiatives without sufficient financial resources. Well, this'll, if I'm understanding correctly, you'll be able to issue bonds and such. This will be funding your UN Agenda 21 programs for years to come and give you incredible funding to really screw us over more than you already are. I'm very concerned because I'm sure that the 3 that will be on the board from us, like Nora will probably be one of them. Well, Nora Vargas and Alicia Palma, the Consul of Mexico, are both young global leaders, as is Gavin Newsom. And if after you guys were told about the video with Klaus Schwab saying that he's penetrating governments, if that doesn't concern you and isn't a conflict of interest, plus the fact that Nora was raised in Mexico, I don't know what to say. Also,
your time expired. Our next commenter, sir, your time has expired. Catherine Rhodes, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Paul Hankin.
Hello, Catherine Rhodes, and actually I really like the agreement. I think that this specific agreement between the United States and Mexico and, getting federal approval and stuff like that should be followed for, the exact same thing should be followed for the sewage crisis that we have. We have the sewage crisis. We don't even have the report. The report is like secret of what's wrong with the sewage crisis. It's ridiculous. If we had it here, and was subject to the Brown Act, we would actually have a lot of good information that we could use. You could use, so my recommendation is use the same type of thing that you have here for the border sewage issue. And then, of course, I don't like to have, if we're paying for all this money, I don't think we should have the readers in Mexico. That's crazy. I mean, who thought of that? And if somebody just brought it up, just say no to that. Thank you.
Our next commenter, Paul Hinken, will be followed by the final two, Consuelo and Blair Beekman. Paul, go ahead.
I can see a big problem in the recitals in the agreement even. You call it Otay Mesa East. The Mexicans call it Otay Mesa 2. Having two names could lead to unnecessary confusion and legal complications. This alone screams out for a rewrite. Now, if you collect, you should not be collecting tolls exclusively through a cashless system. What if a driver forgets or misplaces his or her charge card? Are you going to clog the freeway and delivery schedule by making him or her turn around? And the true-up fund sounds a bit arbitrary. It should compensate them and us for operations and maintenance costs first, before any bond replacement costs or other costs. Hope this is included in the agreements. The board of directors should all.
Your time expired. Consuelo, please go ahead.
Infuriating. This project includes border protection. What kind of protection? Because we could use that protection now with millions crossing illegally. And obscene 1.3 billion for a project, spending so much on just on stupid mitigation. Seriously offensive. Are you all that insane? Do you not see how wrong and wasteful this is? Promoting trade and economic growth. For who? Not the people. This is so sick that you all are spending so irresponsibly and reckless. How about using that money to fix the fucking sewage stench from the Tijuana River, making our county residents sick and worsening even more their already poor quality of life? SANDAG's got no business starting any projects until they successfully complete one. So many regulations for the people, but no one is regulating the regulators. A completely cashless system? Holy shit, social credit score, here we come. Welcome to a Chinaca. A purposely broken whack-ass system with a clueless population have come to love their servitude and enslavement.
Your time expired. Our final commenter, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Again, it took a bit of time for me to get to my phone to raise my hand. Thank you. Also, a beginning thank you to Consuela on her words on the previous item. If we can improve upon whistleblower protection ideas, good luck how to do that. For this item, part of the reason I moved to San Diego is to be around border issues. I find this interesting work and hopeful, really hopeful. So while I hear what the public is saying for this item, I think there has to be a degree of tact involved. There's a reason why these programs are so secretive, the sewer issues. We have to be open and clear, and we want to do that here in SANDAG. And it's that openness and clarity and working together that we can build some really good stuff. And that means tech accountability. Really work on tech accountability with these issues. It can foster good relationships and ways to be open about conversation. And it's important stuff. Good luck in Tijuana issues, mixed income, to talk about mixed income with Tijuana issues too. Thanks.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. On to board comments. Councilmember Fisher.
Thanks, Chair. Since our last discussion about this item, not much has really changed. We've had another 60 days of beach closures down in Imperial Beach. We've had millions of gallons of sewage coming down our thing. And the thing is, it's really not just sewage, it's toxins. There are pollutants in this river that are coming down that this wastewater treatment plant that's broken, that has been failed by our federal government to fix. It was never designed to treat the toxins that it has going through it. And so, my feelings still haven't changed in the last 60 days. I'm still pretty upset that the members of this board and who sat around this table 2 years ago didn't have the foresight to think about an opportunity to fix a historic problem. This isn't something that's happened in the last couple of years. For me, I became an elected official because I want to change something. I want to make change in my city. I see a lot of nodding heads. I think those who sit around this table embody the same feeling. We want to be game changers. And I think this gives us an opportunity to change the game that was set forth with us. I have no problem with the agreements. I think that it's going to be a fantastic operation. Absolutely. On slide number 5 that was shown, it talked about a 5-to-1 benefit. That hurts. That hurts a lot because we didn't include people in the equation. I don't know what, I'm a blue collar person. I'm not the smartest guy. I got through as much as I could read of the agreements. And I still don't disagree with the project. I just want us as a board to find a way to use our binational working group, our relations, to have that conversation with Mexico, to help us ask them and urge them to enforce some discipline on their end. Having raw sewage is just amazingly crazy running down on dry things. That sewage plant was meant to collect about 25 million gallons and process it and treat it a day. Huge amount, but that's what it was made for. At this point, because our government has failed us in the upkeep, $150 million worth of deferred maintenance. That is unheard of for any agency that exists, unless a governmental agency. We continue to be snubbed by our governor. We've pleaded, we've asked, all of you as council, as mayors in this region have asked him to do something. He continues to say no. He won't even entertain it. The president of this country doesn't think that it's an important part of it because our governor doesn't think it's important. The 750,000 residents who live in the southern part of the border who are affected by this aren't worth it for him to put forth any effort, and now cites budget shortfalls is the main reason. So my ask again of this board is that we make a commitment together, that we direct our CEO to get a working group together to put the pressure on Mexico, as well as our own federal government. We are an agency who has worked not only up and down, back and forth, left and right, up and over the border and back so well to get big things done. We as a council in Imperial Beach, we've asked everywhere. We've worked extremely hard with the city council in Chula Vista or in Coronado, and we're thankful for that, all of those who've supported us. But I really want this agency to give it our best go to make sure that we do something, that we are the game changers of the future, that a historic problem that not only plagues a small city of 27,000, but is now plaguing a region that's 3 to 4 to 5 to 8 miles away from the border of the source. This is an environment, my children have never had the opportunity to spend lots of time in the beach. Myself, I grew up in the summer spending all my time at the beach. I've not touched the water in Imperial Beach in 2 years. I'm not alone. We're 2 to 3 generations of families who have not had the opportunity. When we talk about equity, this is not equity in my opinion. And so again, I will end my comments by just again urging our CEO and this board to act in harmony and unity, to go forward and to ask our governments plurally to do what is right for the people of these countries. Thank you.
Council member, as we discussed, I did bring this up to Chairwoman as one of my action items when I present my plan. The board can direct me to do that, but it's part of my job, and you can take action to what you just mentioned, but it's already in the work plan. We'll have to get together. I think, you know, same as you, I grew up going to Silver Strand and Imperial Beach. That was my regional beaches that I used to go to. I think that, you know, and I won't delay more this item, but I think that it's important that we look at opportunities. You know, we are in a situation on this, but the opportunity that Alta Mesa East brings to us is that the team has learned how to engage, has learned how to prioritize issues in the transportation realm. That doesn't mean, and this was one of the plans that Chairwoman directed me, that we can't have a master plan on environmental border issues, that we can't have a joint working group among all ourselves and different stakeholders of how we go and advocate strategically to be able to pursue solutions on both sides of the border. It's going to take a village. It's going to take at all levels on both sides of the border to tackle this issue. What's immediately in front of us is, yes, solving the plant issues, right? That's in Mexico's doing their part. On our side, our federal government is doing our part, but that may not be enough. That won't be enough. And we will have to have a kind of a master and strategic plan, and we're all going to have to be very nimble and having some sort of intelligence between all of us, how we engage, who does what, when, and who we push so they can meet their schedules, how we pursue funding. So yes, the board can take action and direct me to do that, but it's already part of my work plan to do that. So I just want to respond to you in that way.
Councilmember Fisher, I really appreciate you bringing that up, and perhaps you'd like to make a motion which would include directing the CEO to put together an official working group to work with the Mexican government to use this opportunity, a little bit of leverage to get something done.
Absolutely. I'd love to make that motion to kind of reiterate what you just mentioned, Chair. I'd appreciate that.
Great. Do I have a second?
Happy to second.
Okay, second by Duncan. All righty, let's go on to Councilmember Burkhalter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Orso, for articulating that you do want to move further and resolve them or mitigate the circumstances with the sewage. I'm just wondering, this project is said to be valued at $7.2 billion over the course of 40 years. That's about $180 million a year, just raw numbers. And I understand that the Board of Supervisors has secured some funding for the sewage mitigation. They are estimating it would be $310 million. And I'm kind of sad Nora's not here because I was going to ask her about that, but I think they've secured 110,000 or something, 110 million, but they need $200 more million. I'm just wondering if there's any way we could set aside some of the profits that we will be getting for this border crossing into a fund to finally fix this problem like once and for all. And I don't know the answer to that.
Do you want to talk about the
The team is figuring out. Senate Bill 1486 was the enabling legislation that made SANDAG the toll authority and basically put out the authorization of what could be done with the funds. Current legislation says that it's in a lockbox that can only be used in the corridor, meaning State Route 11 and the port of entry, to help CBP and GSA. So it can be used within the port of entry and on the state highway for improvements and also staffing assistance. That's how it is right now. Right now, the commitments that are being negotiated with CBP takes a lot of those funds, and Betsy can talk a little bit more about that. It will be in the future coming, commits a lot of those funds to renew the port of entry. I think it will, to be able to tap into those funds will require state legislation to be changed.
Okay, thank you. And I did want to say, Betsy and Maria, that the amazing, cooperation that you all are doing with our partners in Mexico. I applaud you for the successes that you have.
Thank you. Councilmember Duncan.
Thank you. So I have a few comments on all the comments that were made. This is obviously an issue I work 10 to 20 hours a week on. We just had the US IBWC working group meeting in Coronado on Wednesday night to discuss the plan on the US side of the border. 2 weeks ago, I went down with Congressmember Vargas and Congressmember Jacobs and Mary Geary from Imperial Beach to inspect the Mexico plant at San Antonio de los Buenos and to see what's happening there. A few points that are really, really important. One is there are two parties to this agreement, right? So it's not just the US. There is the Mexico money that will eventually be on a profit, right? And I couldn't quite understand from what was put forth to us, when do these agreements estimated to churn into revenue that's not paying off debt for both sides? I mean, I'm pretty good with numbers, but I couldn't figure it out.
Mexico is paying with public funds their construction. So I can't talk about what they're going to do with their portion, which is $3.6 billion, but that's their part. On our side, I don't know which year we make it even. Maybe if you have the numbers, Peter. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Peter Schellenberger, PFM. The debt necessary to finance the project, of course, there's federal funds, state funds, and then there's debt secured solely by the toll revenues, and that amount is about $270 million to contribute towards the project, another $50 million to capitalize interest and fund up reserves. So about $320 million of debt to be issued. We would issue that over a 40-year term. The revenues, I know you spoke about just taking the 3.6 million and dividing over a 40-year period. The revenues have a fairly steep slope to them. They start off, they have a slow ramp up period as users begin to pay tolls, and then over time, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they have a really large amount towards the back end. So the debt's structured in a similar way. There's as opposed to a traditional sales tax bond, which is very similar to a house mortgage, equal payments in an annual structure. This has a backloaded structure. So we're going to start off paying debt in a small amount because the revenues are lower in the earlier years. And then towards that 30 and 40-year period, larger payments will prevail. So we'll be paying, or the debt would be paid over a 40-year period. In every year in which debt is paid, though, SANDAG's annual receipts will both pay debt service, O&M cost, fund up reserves, and then it'll go to contribute towards GSA and CBP. So there's quite a few demands on cash flow right now.
So understood. And part of the reason, I asked the question is because, a year ago, I went down to Mexico City and met with the lawyers about why are all the projects, failing? The water reclamation plant that was supposed to treat the sewage and send water to the Guadalupe Valley. How did that project blow up? How did it fail? And why hasn't the project that they promised under the minute order with the United States under the USMCA to redo their plant at San Antonio de los Buenos, why hasn't that started? And at that time, it was with the state still. And they explained to me that the way it works in Mexico is just because they say they're going to fund something, that doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. They then have to find a tax resource, and they don't create new ones. So they have to go to a project that's being funded by taxes, take that tax revenue source and reattach it to another project, and basically told me that it would never happen. Then subsequently, too much to my surprise and happiness, the federal government came in and took over the San Antonio de los Buenos plant and is rehabbing it now. But there were questions earlier about, I think Councilmember Fisher was referring to our plant, which is absolutely right. That was disclosed a year ago in April that it hadn't been maintained and there was no advocacy to get new funds happening at that time. But the Mexico plant, they had a plant there. It didn't last very long, and it's been down for decades. So while we were there, they put up the first wall in the holding tank. They've said they're flipping a switch on October 1st to make it operational. But even that plant, I don't think people really talk about. That's not even really going to treat half the sewage that goes through Punta Banderas area. Our plant that's being done is supposed to treat up to potentially 90% with the surge capacity once done. But that's a 3 to 5 year project. I don't want to go on about it too long, but just a little edification since we're all together. You may recall the USMCA agreement in 2020, there was $310 million allocated for our plant. Well, how did we get to $150 million in deferred maintenance if we had all this money? Well, none of that money arrived to the IBWC, which operates the U.S. plant, until this year in 2024. It took 4 years to go through the EPA to get to us, and they sucked up $20 million of it. So now that is there. And then in the last 2024 budget for the federal government, much to my surprise, after we were told pretty much no on all of our visits with Mayor Geary and Mayor Bailey and myself to DC, they did add an additional $140 million to the maintenance budget of our plant, which was better in some ways how they did it. Instead of a one-time grant, it looks like a maintenance budget that will be funded regularly. So the 2025 budget hopefully we'll have a similar amount above what the IBWC was already receiving. But Councilmember Fisher's right. I mean, it's insane and it's egregious. And how do we tell anybody it's ever going to be fixed if there's deferred maintenance and our plant was broken because of the increased flows? And as I believe the CEO said, Tijuana is going to keep growing. So if we have one plant in Mexico doing half the sewage there, one plant in the United States doing 80 to 90%, the move from 80 to 90% recently happened with the commissioner of the IBWC's commitment. But we need further plans. And that's why we bring up the Mexico funding. It is not necessarily impossible to say, is there any way to have any of this tax source? In a way, that's what a toll is, right? I mean, it's a revenue source potentially applied at some point to their plant on their side of the border. I mean, it is a binational agreement we're working on today. They're a signatory. And I think you said some things still were being negotiated about how our funds will be used, not necessarily with them, but maybe on our side, how that's going to be written up. So to me, it's not inappropriate to talk about. And the truth is, I mean, SANDAG, to my knowledge, in all these years, it's a 30-year plus problem, has never done anything on this issue. So I appreciate that, it's up for being in an action plan now, but I'm glad Councilmember Fisher made the motion because I think there are things that we can do. There's infrastructure things, or we work on housing. There's things we can do. It probably is one of the most inequitable societal things that take place because our poorest areas, not all of them, but many of the poorest population in San Diego lives between the border and Imperial Beach, inland and up to Coronado. Those are the only beaches their kids can go to unless they can travel a much, much further distance. So anyways, thank you for letting me make my comments. And again, I hope the Consul General of Mexico shows up for this type of meeting in the future. This is a huge deal for her country, and I'm very disappointed that she's not here.
Thank you. Councilmember Shu. And I'm just going to point out the time. So just let's okay.
Thank you. Chair, just to be clear, right now we have a motion to develop this working group. Is that correct? So I hope we go to the question of that. And my thoughts on that issue is, I feel very emotionally tied to these issues of air quality and as well as sewage issues along our border. I know it affects these cities greatly in our whole region. But I want to couple of steps back to look at the overall relations between the United States and Mexico. And this is kind of off the side kind of a comment, but perhaps if the United States follow through its treatments of treaties of amount of water going down the Rio Grande River, as well as the Colorado River, perhaps Mexico will be more sensitive to our issues. We've taken up millions of acre feet of water that was Mexico's water, but we captured it on our side of the border before it got released to Mexico. So perhaps if we are more sensitive to that issue, they can be more sensitive to our issues of the sewage problems we're suffering. With that said, I think that working group needs to be formed because of this is such a vital issue to our region and to our residents. So I hope we move forward on that. Just to make it easier, I want to make some comments on the agendized item itself, which is the Otay Mesa East project was our region's approach to solve a major environmental crisis with regards to air pollution and congestion of trucks and vehicles on the border. We had to navigate international issues. And now this amendment in part is to navigate our own restrictions on fee collection on the US highway, that we can't spend that money freely. So that's why we had to put the fee collection system south of the border. It's navigating all kinds of rules that our government, and probably both state and federal government, has formed that did not conceive of this kind of a crossing and the needs of this kind of crossing. So I'm glad that we have very, I wouldn't say creative, but real problem solvers at SANDAG to work out these issues and make these adjustments to this agreement so we can go forward. Because we do want to solve this other problem of air pollution and congestion that affects that region as well. In the meantime, if we can also weigh in on the sewage crisis, all the best. But I hope when we do that, we take a few steps back and see the bigger problems with regards to the international crossing itself and a number of things there. But in any case, I move that we move on a question on the current motion, and I hope, and right after that, I would want to move on the motion to move this item forward as well.
They've been combined, but hold on, we'll go to Deputy Mayor Keim. He said he'd be brief, and then we'll go to Councilmember Moreno.
Just from the opposite side of the county, I want to express our support for Imperial Beach, very similar cities, and how important our beaches are to us. My daughter's in junior lifeguards, and her and her class just swam around our pier for the first time. So to hear your kids not being able to get in the water is extremely infuriating and frustrating for us. So I want to make sure that Mr. Orso knows you have all of our support from Oceanside to there to try to put leverage and pull any lever you can that we have control over to get this fixed for Imperial Beach. We owe it to them, and you have our complete support.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Moreno.
I just wanted to express my support for the proposal and the motion made here today. I know it's been a long time coming. Generally, GSA is the one that is building borders. And in this case, it's SANDAG and Caltrans, and you guys have, and the Mexican government, you guys have really navigated very treacherous waters, for the lack of a better term, being set back and, getting the ball right on the marker on this. So I just want to remind folks, this is $50 billion of commerce that we're talking about in our region. So this infrastructure project is extremely important, not only to the residents of my district, but also to the general public in the region in San Diego, but also to the state of California. And a lot of different states are number one trading partners with them is Mexico. So obviously a very important infrastructure item that we have here. So I'm happy to support the motion before us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Townsend.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ditto much of what Councilman Moreno just said. And barring the concerns, we acknowledge the concerns raised by Imperial Beach and many others regarding the sewage crisis down at the border. Being a transportation agency, we're not so much involved as much, but certainly we have channels with Sacramento. So we'll continue to channel that message forward. So barring that concern, we do want to sort of acknowledge all of the work that has been done on the border for many, many years, actually the last 3 decades or so. This project was envisioned nearly 3 decades ago to bring this crossing to the region. And so much work has been done. Caltrans has been a partner with SANDAG in the counties for many years while we completed State Route 905. Completed State Route 125, State Route 11, and now we're looking to the cumulative completion of this project with the POE. So the state of California is definitely in support of this, as well as our member agencies. And so I just wanted to echo our support, continued support going forward to get this project completed. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Mayor Kranz.
Appreciate the report. The question I have relates to the binational working group. One thing that struck me is that even number of members and operate under Robert's rules and things. And I want to know if on table 4 goes into dispute resolution, if there are tie votes, will the issue go to dispute resolution, or does it follow Robert's rules about no action, or how does that go?
So you would need a majority of those present for an action to pass. So if it doesn't pass, there's a tie, it doesn't pass. So it would fail the action.
Is there no concern about stalemates and other important issues that are not advanced because of that particular situation, especially with the 3 members from Mexico, 3 members from SANDAG? It just seems rife for problems if there a controversy develops.
I can offer one item and then Maria maybe. One of the things that's unique about this project is how aligned our interests are to have a successful port of entry, to have it operational, to adopt a budget so that we can pay our expenses. So you can, over lawyer an agreement. At the end of the day, if the parties' interests are aligned, that's going to do more than any agreement will ever do for you.
I appreciate that, and I don't disagree with it. I just know that the best laid plans sometimes, there can be controversy that develops over things, and so it concerns me a little bit not having a way to move forward if there is that. The topic is dispute resolution. It would be nice if there was a way to kick something that continued to receive a tie vote into dispute resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, the true nature of the agreements is to be equal partners. And we carry that in every discussion we have, from financial, the toll collection, split equally the agreements. And there are measures in place, though, that would allow us to continue business, right? The board can still continue with a budget if necessary, even if the working group has not agreed to the new budget.
Yes,
Do you wanna
there
speak
is
to
a
that?
provision in the agreement that permits the board to prevent a default under the bond indenture or TIFIA loan agreement to amend, modify, adopt a budget. So there are provisions in place to protect SANDAG.
I think, Mayor, just to add, the SANDAG board is still the toll authority. That is the ultimate authority. The working group is where we get together, the agencies, and we provide advice to the board of directors.
Well, I interpret that to mean if it gets hung up down there, we'll be able to take care of it here.
Pretty much, business will continue because of our commitments with the bond indentures. Business can't stop. And also Mexico will have to understand, because no cash flow will be being continued.
Thank you.
All right, so if we could put the motion up, which is to approve the agreements and also to direct the CEO to set up a temporary advisory working group to negotiate our border issues. If we could just put the word temporary together, a temporary working group to address environmental concerns in the border region.
Should we specify, sorry, Chair, should we specify specifically the sewage situation?
Environmental concerns
know.
at the border region,
Including but not limited to.
including but not limited,
Yeah,
Trans-
I would feel more comfortable just if the maker of the motion.
including but not limited.
I think there's a motion on the floor, though, and we should probably follow Robert's Rules of Order and ask the maker of the motion
Very true.
if he's okay
Well,
with that.
I think he was the one who was saying yes, yes, yes.
I
yes.
was suggesting it, yes, as a maker of the motion.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're
Thank you for-
following Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you
Yes,
for
and following
keeping
those
me
Robert's
in
Rules
order.
of Orders as the maker of the second on it, I would also confirm my second on the motion.
Okay, I have a couple more people up on the board now to speak. Before I call the vote, I will go to Councilmember Martinez from Del Mar. Oh, that was an error. Okay, and Mayor Kranz, are you back up again? No, I see your name up there again?
No.
No. Okay, all right. Those were ghosts. I will call for the vote. Let's all.
Oh, hold on. So I just want to be clear, the proposed action was to adopt a resolution authorizing execution of the agreements. And I just want to confirm that rather than this board of directors approving the agreements, we are still adopting the resolution authorizing the execution. Is that correct?
Is there going to be another vote in addition to the one that's on the screen now? Then we want to make sure that whatever action you guys need is incorporated within this.
Yes. I forget the resolution number. I just want to make sure that that's incorporated and we're adopting that resolution.
Okay. It's resolution 2023-05, I think.
A four-person quorum is a disaster.
Yes. Resolution 2024-32.
No, I think it goes up. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. See. Is that right? Betsy, can you please read that and make sure that's okay?
2024-32.
Excuse me, Chair.
Okay, Betsy, the Borders Committee recommends the Board of Directors approve the federal and binational agreements for State Route 11, port of entry, including adoption of Reso 2024-32. Additionally, the board directs the CEO to put together a temporary working group to address environmental concerns, including but not limited to trans-border sewage issues in the border region. All right? Everybody's
Maker and seconder are good with that language?
Yes, thank you.
very good.
I don't
Let's
think
vote.
that we're approving the federal agreement today, are we? Today is just the binational agreements. The federal project agreement will come at a different time.
Okay, so we want to
So
remove
approve the
federal
binational
and.
agreements?
So get rid of the words federal and. Wait, no, that was too much.
Unless you want to approve it today, it would be.
No. We want to brief the board on it.
Oh, I'm trying to see this right.
Okay, yes?
Staff recommendation, and just do the work group separately.
I think we've come this far on this route. Let's
It's
just.
missing.
continue.
Resolution in here.
Binational needs to come back in.
That accomplishes, that first sentence will accomplish what we want to do.
Okay, all right, we're good? Everybody's good? All right, please vote.
Issue of the minutes, yeah. We add something.
Yeah. This is gone. Carlsbad? There we go.
That motion passes with those members present.
Thank you. All righty, before we move to closed session, let's take our continued non-agenda public comments.
Continued non-agenda public comments. There were,
But the economic impact on Imperial Beach is now.
excuse me, there were 5
We're also gonna talk about.
continued non-agenda comments. If you are still present virtually, Paul Hankin, Consuelo, and Blair Beekman, please raise your hands. Mary Davis and Rita Clement, if you're present. Mary Davis, please come to the podium.
Hi, thank you for those of you who have stuck around. First of all, I do want to see the Pledge of Allegiance done at every single meeting, including policy advisory group committees. Also, I would like an invocation added. If you have time for a land acknowledgement, you have time for God, and our country needs restoration and revival. And speaking of the land acknowledgement, you keep using the word unceded, but I want to respectfully point out that if it's unceded, you're in charge. And that begs the question, why are you perpetuating colonialism? Perhaps maybe consider giving Mission Trails or the golf course at Torrey Pines back as reparations. Lastly, I'm asking to remove Mr. Elo Rivera from his position of leadership as vice chair. He has neither the demeanor nor the statesmanship to lead, and also the missed opportunity to enact the values from this last item. I felt like that you could have withheld that revenue. Caltrans passing their concerns along does nothing for the woman and IB with a MRSA infection. Thank you.
And Rita Clement.
Good afternoon,
Chair Mayor Hebner, SANDAG board members, and SANDAG staff. My name is Rita Clement, and I'm a volunteer with San Diego 350. I am grateful to SANDAG staff who have the expertise and institutional knowledge to move the public works projects through the various phases of design, environmental review, and construction. We believe SANDAG staff deserve a respectful work environment. Thank you to staff who work hard every day to keep San Diego moving. We appreciate your work and know that you too are doing the good work of the people. Together, we can keep San Diego moving forward. Thank you.
Our first virtual commenter, Paul Henkin, please go ahead.
Something that concerns me is the remark about not over lawyering. That's pretty much, to me, it's an open invitation to more corruption. Now it is disgusting that Solana Beach was not briefed when the issue first rose that a tunnel under the Del Mar Fairgrounds would mean the taking of 50 homes there. It reminds me of when I went to a SANDAG transit workshop where they asked for suggestions, but the map they had did not include East County. I hope this is not standard operating procedure to just ignore the opposition. There are many other reasons, and I'm glad that Sacramento is considering them in SB 1098, the good work of Senator Blakespear, or a few. Well, I don't really have time to.
And your time expired. Our next commenter, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Blair Beekman. Yeah, I had a thank you to board of SANDAG people. I've learned how to talk about the future of peace as the work, peace internationally in Ukraine and in Israel as work we can do here at the local level towards openness and accountability. If we really work towards those good things as a community process, it really builds peace. It really builds open democracy, and they need those examples in other countries. And it builds our future. We know what to do. Also, just a thank you to good luck to, I think both choices can be good in Biden or Kamala Harris. Good luck how Biden has to deliberate and consider things. He's got a lot to think about. Good luck in all of our efforts. I back both of them. Good luck what we can do. Thank you.
And our final commenter on this continued non-agenda is Consuelo. Please go ahead.
Oh, Blair. Okay, so dream on, Jack. You are not a problem solver there at SANDAG, no matter how many times you say it to yourself. And Fisher, do you not get the game by now? You know damn well this project border ain't going to give you leverage, nor does it benefit the people of IB. The TJ River thing should, for the people's health alone, be the priority. And you're correct, Mario, it's going to take a village and not the government. They're incompetent on our dime. It's time to start demanding our taxes back to handle the shit that government keeps dropping the ball on. Reminder, what scares the political pawns more than anything is people refusing to hand over their consent. Whether you vote one way or the other, win or lose, you are handing your consent to the system. Remove your consent to this illegitimate government. Unregister to vote. That too radical? How? Oh, because continuing paying for an incompetent system isn't. That's actually insane and reckless. But go ahead, vote all you want, because the secret government won't.
Your time expired. That concludes the continued non-agenda public comments.
Okay, now let's take public comments on the closed session item.
I currently have 2 in-person commenters on closed session and 1 virtual. Truth, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Mark.
First, there's Scott Osmond and Leslie Osmond versus the City of San Diego, Sempra and SANDAG. This case was filed in 2020 regarding a personal injury, property damage, or wrongful death involving a motor vehicle. It sounds like SANDAG's going to file a case back or maybe denying the claim like at every meeting. And there's also 2 potential cases against SANDAG as always. For expensive defense, SANDAG has Greg Bergman from BDG Law Group based in LA. Apparently they couldn't find a local lawyer. And SANDAG also has Ryan Cohote, Director of Strategic Projects, who has a law degree and is the former Deputy City Attorney for the City of San Diego. He's also one of the people who thinks we should waste billions and billions of tax dollars on an anti-people monstrosity. This is one of SANDAG's many employees that are free and lawful to praise or critique at every meeting, especially if they're going to be a government lifer staying until they can collect on a taxpayer-funded cushy retirement check. But perhaps one of these impending lawsuits is regarding the fact that SANDAG flubs up so many times, racking up debt like taxpayers' money as a stolen credit card, and then taxing those same taxpayers with more and more tolls where 50% goes to a foreign country.
Your
SANDAG's
time
is
expired. Our next commenter, Mark, please come to the podium.
Mark, thanks for those of you who stayed. Here's 2 very important things. One is obviously the tolls are simply an unvoted on tax against the people. The corporations will simply charge us more for the goods that pass the border. Secondly, what you just voted on, number 5, and I can't believe none of you thought this, and I only had a minute so I can get to say it. If it says right here, here's a quote, a quorum of 4 or more voting members of the BWG is required to conduct meetings. That means if one member of our American team is missing, they can pass horrifying stuff against us. That is, all 6 should be absolutely required at any meeting. I can't believe you passed it. You better stop it now. You better revote. You better do something. This is a real serious thing. And I can't believe no one thought of it. And I only have 1 minute, so I couldn't tell you about it. Why don't you give us a little more time? You've made a huge mistake. Huge. Think about that. One American member who's had a taxi doesn't give a ride. The car breaks. They can conduct
Your
their
time
meeting.
has expired. I do have 2 final commenters on this item. Consuelo will be followed by Paul Hankin. Consuelo, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the whole sewage thing, it's really time for the people to start taking it in their own hands. You don't need to wait on the government. Just, you know what? If they want their fucking tax dollars, they got to work for it. Honestly, like this is so stupid that we've allowed this. This is so retarded. This is so, it's reckless. It's dumb. Like that we have been so dumbed down and we have allowed for this abuse to go on and on and on and on. And you guys act like you're there trying to represent the people. Have them represent themselves. Encourage them to show the fuck up. I'm done. Happy Friday.
And I just want to remind the final commenter, this is comments on the closed session item only. Paul, please go ahead.
Yes, on the closed session item, it would be helpful in the future. I mean, since Mario Orso in particular seems to be fostering a sort of an open dialogue thing, it would be helpful to include a brief, you know, maybe 1 or 2 line summary of what the closed session matter is about, rather than just leaving it at the court title. Also, I note that unlike yesterday where we got 2 minutes, Sean must be back. We only got 1. Have a nice weekend.
And that concludes the public comments on closed session.
Okay, now let's move into closed session, which means everyone who doesn't need to be here, please exit the room. Will you tell us when we're online? We're online? Okay, Ryan, would you like to report out?
Sure, yes. The board was briefed in closed session and no reportable actions were taken.
Okay, very good. This concludes our meeting. The next Board of Directors meeting is July 26th at 9 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.